I'm Edwin Samuelson, and welcome to the CineFiles. To my left, Eric Cohen. To his left, Jeff Galashaw. And to his left, Michael Fultz.
Rock on.
All right, so let's just make this really random order here. I'm going to start off with you, Jeff. You recommended, please tell us.
No Way to Treat a Lady, starring George Segal and the legendary Rod Steiger. George Segal plays a police detective who is investigating these murders that, I'm not really spoiling anything, are done by Rod Steiger playing multiple, well, he's playing the same character but wearing multiple disguises. And also one of the other B plots of this movie is that he's very henpecked to his mother and he's interested in dating this girl. And I just thought,
George Segal is, not Rod
You
Steiger.
might want to mention that it's the typical Jewish mother syndrome where he's dating a Gentile.
Yes, but it's still, the movie is thrilling but funny at the same time, and that is why I like it so much. And, you know, I'm starting to become a huge George Segal fan because I hadn't seen a lot of his work, but after seeing this film, I loved it. And Rod Steiger, to me, can do no wrong, especially after seeing this film.
Dude, see Amityville Horror.
I mean, I know he can do wrong. Hey, we all have to take a paycheck sometimes.
Rod Steiger chews so much scenery in this film, but yet it is yet it is so wonderful. To be honest with you, I'm so glad you recommended this film. Just for the record, Jeff and I don't always see eye to eye on films, but I was so overjoyed after I saw this film because it was really, truly a hidden gem. And I have been a George Segal fan for a long time. George Segal is so wonderful because, you're right, he does play this henpecked mama's boy that's got to deal with the overbearing Jewish mother, but he's also like kind of a hard case detective who does his job well.
Exactly.
And Rod Steiger's such a wonderful villain. I mean, especially his role as like the gay guy.
And he looks like he's having such a good time.
Yeah.
Playing this multiple roles. I mean, you know, he's basically a Bluebeard type, but the thing is he plays a different character each time he tries to insinuate himself in these women's lives.
Let's establish the fact that he was an actor, and so he's acting these different roles.
Well, he was a Broadway producer. He ran a Broadway theater, and he was sort of getting out his acting Jones.
And I believe his mother.
I like the film quite a bit. I think the performances are very good. Unfortunately, I just think the whole thing with the mother with George Segal it's kind of off-putting because it's a little kind of shoehorned to the movie and it becomes overbearing at times where you lose focus of the thriller aspect of the movie. I think George Segal actually played the role better, and perhaps I think the greatest comedy of all time, which is Where's Papa?
Oh yeah.
With Ruth Gordon, and that's the similar story.
It's an insane movie.
I think it's got some great New York location photography. In fact, it was shot right where I used to go to school. A lot of the murder scenes, and as you mentioned, Rod Steiger really does look like he's having a good time because he gets to play all these different roles. It's an actor playing
a ham.
Yeah,
he's a ham.
An actor playing multiple roles. It's like a man doing a one person play.
You said that you felt that the Jewish mother thing was shoehorned a bit, but I think it's actually a great way in the film to show how one man has an overbearing mother and is an effective cop and gets the girl, where the other one had an overbearing mother and completely had a nervous breakdown and became a killer.
Well, I mean, I think I understand why they put it in there. I just think it was a little too much. They could have trimmed a little bit out, and it would have, I think, a much stronger film. But I've always liked No Way to Treat a Lady. But I still, like I said, I think George Segal did it better in Where's Papa, which...
Well, I think they're two different films.
Yeah,
I mean, let's just say this. No Way to Treat a Lady is a dark comedy with a horror edge, it's a thriller edge. Whereas Papa is just a blackest black comedy, as you can imagine, with some slapstick in there.
Oh, I think it's more slapstick than black comedy.
All right, Eric, how about you? Why don't you recommend your film?
Well, I chose this particular film because we have a tendency to talk about films like around 1970 or later, either that or like movie geek type movies and things like that. And then trying to choose a film which I couldn't figure out what these guys had seen before, so I tried to go for something really obscure out there, but still kind of enjoyable to watch. And one of my favorite screenwriters ever is Billy Wilder. One of his later films was a film called The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes. And it's one of my kind of, favorite kind of movies of its kind. It's a Sherlock Holmes movie, but it's sort of a Sherlock Holmes movie with a bit of an edge to it. It's more of a screwball comedy than it is a genuine mystery. It has a very interesting interpretation of Sherlock Holmes by an actor named Robert Stevens, who was the father of Toby Stevens, who was the James Bond villain in Die Another Day. And I just think it's a very enjoyable, very kind of, light, entertaining film. And Christopher Lee's in it. And he plays Sherlock Holmes' smarter brother, Mycroft.
Well, what's so funny is that, I feel like an idiot here because I really was never too much into Sherlock Holmes, but it did clear up something. I was always, I know it sounds like I'm going off topic, I'm not, but there's a line in Up in Smoke, the Cheech and Chong movie, where Cheech goes, "Man, you do too much coke, you're paranoid." And he goes, "Sherlock Holmes did coke." And I always thought that was a funny line because, Sherlock Holmes, did coke. I mean, come on, the guy's a genius. But then you actually see him doing cocaine in the movie,
right.
The 7 Cent Solution, which I never even realized that. And I always thought I liked the way they handled the use of the drug in the movie. Now, you might want to talk a little bit about the history of this film, because when I watched the DVD based on your recommendation, there's a huge supplement on the history of the making of this film, that it was going to be 3 stories in the movie.
Basically, Billy Wilder's big challenge with this film is that he wanted to present the Sherlock Holmes story in a different light, and he had these ideas about, Sherlock Holmes is probably a homosexual. You want to sort of present that in some way. He also wanted to tackle the cocaine use, which is in the Conan Doyle books. And so he had a much longer movie in mind where, leading up to the actual mystery that is the adventure of the movie, you have these flashbacks to these other kind of little stories. And all these stories are sort of parodies of the whole ideal Sherlock Holmes story. Like, there was this whole story they cut out where Holmes actually is given the opportunity to solve his own mystery, and he completely fucks it up.
That's interesting that you brought up the fact that Wilder decided to portray Holmes as a homosexual. I didn't see that. I thought.
I saw it, absolutely.
I saw him more as impotent.
It was very much, this movie was made at a time when it was like 1969, 1970, kind of like just on the cusp there, but it's shot and filmed as if it was made earlier.
It feels like a 60s film.
I thought he was just impotent.
And they're still trying to, they still had to be careful how they presented that, I guess, censors-wise.
You can imply it.
What was the clues? I mean,
Well, he doesn't have any relationship. He never talks about current relationships.
Also, there's little references at the beginning where he's telling everybody that he and Watson are actually, they live together because they're gay partners.
And then Watson gets pissed off.
Watson gets really pissed off.
That was a good scene.
I actually thought the beginning was awful. I was so mad that you recommended the film because the beginning was such.
What didn't you like about the beginning?
I just thought it was overbearing and just a drag and so tongue-in-cheek, and it was just getting on my nerves. But the more it was going along, I don't know, the movie grew on me as it was going along. I don't know if it was a great movie, but it was definitely interesting. Christopher Lee was fantastic. It was a different take on Sherlock Holmes that you're used to. I found because of his impotency with women, I thought that Holmes was a much more tragic figure, and his drug use. And so towards the end, I was actually surprised that I did enjoy the film.
What about you, Jeff? Interject any time here.
Well, I enjoyed the film. As said before, I enjoyed the scene where he implies that Watson is his homosexual lover, and then as it goes all around the party, all the people's reaction to it, and
the domino effect.
Yes, and how they're discussed, and then finally, when Watson finds out, how pissed he becomes. But generally, I enjoyed the film. I'm also a fan of Billy Wilder, so I had no objections to this film.
Well, I hate to tell you this, Eric. You're gonna hate me for this, but of all the films recommended, this was the film I liked the least.
Okay.
The reason I didn't like it, as it's mentioned in the supplements, even Billy Wilder disowned the film. Is that he filmed it as a roadside attraction, which was where the film would be shown as 2 parts, and in the middle would be an intermission, and then the film will continue. And as you said, it was like 3 different stories to be kind of told, kind of like an anthology. And afterwards, they decided, because the studios were bombing because of Paint Your Wagon and all these things, the studio said it's too long. We got to pare it down to a manageable length. So the editor was assigned to make the film into a smaller film.
It does feel like that. It does feel like that.
It feels very lopsided to me. I feel like it's about to focus. Like the opening is where he's supposed to impregnate this woman, to give her a child. Then it forgets that. Then it's about a spy, helping this woman with this dragon. And I feel like it's just point A to point C to point C to point A to B. It's just all over the place, and I feel that it's incoherent in a lot of places. I do think the actors are phenomenal. I wasn't too familiar with them. I thought Christopher Lee was actually really good. It was weird to see him in a non-horror film at this stage in his career, because this was when he was still doing Dracula. And as he mentions, Billy Wilder this was the best director he's ever worked with, and he was honored to do the film. But to get back on the point, I just felt it was lopsided. There was a lot of holes in the story. I wanted to like it, and even then, it still felt padded out.
Well, I'll give you that. I think, again, the reason why I chose this film is because at the time when we decided to do this show, it was the name of the game was to choose something that you don't think anyone else saw, get them to see it. And it was hard to choose something because I could think of like a million films I would want to recommend, but you guys have probably seen it before. And all I could think about, well, I'm a fan. There's sort of like a subgenre of films that's sort of what I call not really steampunk films, but kind of like Victoriana films that kind of play on literary figures and history and stuff and kind of create...
Oh, like League of Extraordinary
Kind of like League of Extraordinary, but I'm a big fan of like the Flashman novels, you know, things like that.
Serials.
And I was going to say, like, originally I was going to recommend the 7% Solution.
I would have loved to have seen it.
But I think a lot of people, I don't know if you guys have seen it. I wasn't sure if you've seen it.
Then
I should have recommended that instead because that's a much more interesting take on Sherlock Holmes. For one thing, Robert Duvall plays Watson in it.
That's an excellent
which is
casting
bizarre.
That's a good casting choice.
And he does the English accent and everything. It's just very bizarre. But Alan Arkin is phenomenal in it as Sigmund Freud, who cures Sherlock Holmes of his cocaine addiction. And it's just a great, and they have this whole, it was based on a novel by Nicholas Meyer.
Nicholas Meyer from Wrath of Khan.
Right, and he directed it as well, his own novel, and adapted it. But I mean, I'm a big fan of Private Life only because I think it's an unusual film in the Billy Wilder kind of canon, and I think that when it hits, it really hits. I think it's also interesting that Sherlock Holmes basically fucks up.
I thought that was interesting. I like the way they handled the characters where he's not really as bright as he appears, and I like how they show that the Mycroft, his brother, the Christopher Lee character, is like he's the genius. And
well, in the books, actually, Mycroft is the genius.
All right,
Ed.
Well, Mike, I'm going to let you go because I want to say you actually, I think, chose the best movie of the gang here. I think.
Thank you very much. Well, the movie is a John Frankenheimer film called, and I love this man's work. It's called 7 Days in May, and it's based on a teleplay by Rod Serling called "The President's Plane is Missing." And the plot is essentially there is and it sounds like something from a modern day Jerry Bruckheimer thriller. And please, folks, if you haven't seen this film, it's basically a plot that takes place in the military upper echelons, and it's a fascist plot essentially. It's a military takeover, or the plot to take over the presidency by a 4-star general played by Burt Lancaster, and the president of the United States is played by Frederick March, who is not so much based on a Kennedy. He's more based on a Franklin Roosevelt.
Well, I mean, the whole situation with the president being taken over and the communism, the Cuba thing. That's because of the Cuba stuff.
Exactly.
But I'm not talking the actual president himself.
This military conspiracy led by this general, Burt Lancaster, and then one of his friends, who is also a high-ranking military man, Kirk Douglas, is the one that uncovers this plot and realizes this is going to go counter to everything America stands for by having this military coup take place, and he does everything he can to stop it. And there's wonderful roles all over this film. John Houseman as the Secretary of Defense.
No, he's Secretary of the Navy.
Yeah.
And also
he's wonderful.
Martin Balsam, I believe, is
Martin
Balsam. And one of my favorite character actors from that period, Edmund O'Brien.
Yep.
Mr. DOA.
Mr. DOA, among other things. And
I think, and what makes the film, I mean, the writing, you can tell is typical Rod Serling, vintage Serling, that he is
very cynical,
just on top of his game, really well. This was a film I actually talked with Tom Clancy about, and he got pissed off with me. And I said, well, what'd you think of the film? He's like, I think the plot was ridiculous. I was like, why? And he goes, because there is no military man out there that would dishonor the government and the seat of the presidency by trying to attempt a coup like that. That's just ridiculous.
What world does he live in? And by the way, has he read one of his books?
Oh, Tom Clancy's a fuck. Everybody.
Well, that's what you see. I read an interesting sort of like sort of a mini analysis on that film. He said this movie was made during the Reagan era. The Burt Lancaster character will probably be pitched as the hero
of course.
Of the movie. And
absolutely.
What I love about 7 Days in May, actually, what's very interesting about the film, it's very even-keeled. It never gets like high-strung or overly.
No big flashy moments.
No. And what I also love about is that, I mean, Mike is explained that Kirk Douglas is a guy who kind of like sort of figures this out, but he's not really, there's no real like main character in this film.
No, it's
in fact, you think Kirk Douglas is going to be the main hero in this, but but then he's not in the film for a while after that.
It's the plot to me.
Everybody has their moment to shine.
I mean,
and even Burt Lancaster doesn't play like your typical. He's not like a
he's not a mustache villain, but he is a fascist. I mean,
and it's an interesting. What Mike doesn't explain to you is that what they're about to. The whole reason why this is about to happen is the president is about to sign a treaty with Russia. Dismantling nukes, and there's like two philosophies here. You want to have a peace treaty, or you sit there and say you can't trust the Russians. We got to have a bigger bomb than them. It's just bad for nationwide security. And everyone makes their arguments, and they're legitimate arguments. Even Kirk Douglas says, I don't agree with what Burt Lancaster's doing, but I don't agree with signing this peace treaty either.
You know what's so funny is that's actually when you watched Oliver Stone's JFK. That was one of his theories for the assassination of Kennedy. Was the dismantling of the treaty signing. The one thing I gotta give credit to is this movie is so ripped off in every single movie. In fact, one of the biggest rip-offs ever is a movie called No Way Out with Kevin Costner. I'm talking good.
But that was a remake of another film called The Clock.
Of course, but I mean the way it was filmed though, with him uncovering the mystery. And let me tell you something, Burt Lancaster, I think he is the best performance in the movie because he's not the typical villain like, oh, I'm out to get you. He's just very calm and cool.
He's the ultimate patriot.
And you really understand that he, in not a psychotic way, you understand that he thinks he's right.
Yeah, that's why I like it. He's not crazy.
The only thing, though, the ending of the film, when he wants to deliver his speech and he's denied that opportunity, I couldn't help but think there was another film that came out around that time, Inherit the Wind, where the same thing happened, where the least the likable character, who could be construed as the villain of the piece, wants to deliver some speech, is denied his opportunity, and that character was played by Frederick March. And I just kept thinking, this is a little too strangely similar to that, in a weird kind of way. But
it's interesting.
Jeff, jump in here at any time.
One of the best parts of the film, I'll just say this. The confrontation between Frederick March and Burt Lancaster is like one of those movie heaven moments.
And I love Frederick March too. He's another actor
go
from that
at
period.
It, they're at the top of their game.
The original Dr. Jekyll.
And great camera work and beautifully shot film in black and white. And the black and white adds the tension. Has a very film noir look to me, like a very dark kind of mystery. I know it's not a mystery, just a great thriller feel. Very good paranoia view. And let me tell you, one of John Frankenheimer's most underrated films. And by the way, I want to mention all three of these people in the movie. Lancaster, Kirk Douglas, and Frankenheimer are diehard liberals. So it's very unusual to see a film made by liberals with a liberal, and I don't want to say anti-government, but not as pro-patriotic as, because that was not the era of those films. Everything was pro-America,
Well, it is pro-patriotic. It's pro-constitution.
Well, I'm saying it's not,
it's just anti-military.
Yeah, it's anti-military. Everything was pro-military, pro-government, everything. Right. This was a cynical view of that. Jeff, I'd like you to jump in here.
Well, pretty much you guys covered everything, so all I can say is I also enjoyed it. And Burt Lancaster, I would say, gave the performance I enjoyed the most. But then again, I'm a Burt Lancaster fan. So.
I love him. Everything.
I don't know how you can love movies and not love Burt Lancaster.
Great
actor. Mr. Samuelson.
All right. Well, I decided to take a completely different stance from these guys. I decided to choose something very obscure and a foreign film, no less. I was introduced to it recently, and it completely blew me away. And I will go on record saying it was one of the most amazing films I've ever seen. I don't know if these guys will share their opinion with me. The film is called
share our opinion.
Vengeance is Mine with Ken Ogata. It is a film by a director named Shohei Imamura, which is just a very, very unique film with a serial killer, a portrait of a serial killer, but it doesn't really focus on his crimes, but more his character, his life and everything. Now I'm going to jump to you guys. I want you just to jump in here. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, I saw this about last week, and for the first 40 minutes, I was cursing you out, wondering, why were you making me sit through this? But as the movie went on, I started to really get into it. And I liked the flashbacks, and it's still kind of a messed up story, but you start understanding his reasons, even though there is no reason just to go out and murder people. But I have to say it grew on me, and surprisingly there were some sex scenes that just came out of nowhere while I was watching it. But like I said, during the first 30 to 40 minutes, I couldn't stand the film. I thought it was slow, but after a while, you understand those 30 to 40 minutes and how it goes with the story. So
you sound just like Mike talking about Private Life of Sherlock Holmes there.
Well, I enjoyed Private Lives of Sherlock Holmes more than this one, though. Actually,
but Ken Ogata, I think, is phenomenal, and I love that. I love things.
He's the lead, correct?
He's the Ken Ogata, yeah, terrific actor. What I like about the film too is the use of Christianity. Where the man in Japan back then, people were. You could be persecuted for being a Christian. In fact, there was a test they would give Japanese people. This is before this happened, where they put a portrait of the Virgin Mary on the ground, and if you didn't step on it, you were a Christian, and it would kill you. And so people even were Christians in the 50s and whatever. They were, they were kind of ostracized as being weak. And the father was always, picked upon.
It's a Buddhist
Yeah, it's a Buddhist
nation,
society, and they were picked upon because he was a Christian. He goes, you must forgive them because that's the Christian way. And the son could not accept that because he's like, why don't you stand up for yourself? And I believe that's it was a very interesting conflict, and I believe that's why he rebelled against his father and became this notorious killer. He also runs paths with this woman who's a prostitute or runs a geisha house. And I thought the two performances with those two, the loneliness and them connecting, is what really made the movie work for me. The director, Shohei Omura, I think is one of the best directors ever. I mean, he's a Japanese director who's very much like Kurosawa, but he's more interested in the dark side of society, of life. Now, I want to hear about what you think of this, Eric. Did you enjoy the film?
I liked it a lot. I agree with Jeff. It was slow moving at first, and it was a little confusing. The flashback structure was confusing to me at first, but then as I stuck with it, I saw how it all tied together, and the film definitely grew on me. I think Ken Ogata was amazing in it. Really strong performance. I loved all these little nuances that they put into his character, like the fact that he was hanging around with American servicemen. And so he would pepper his language with American English phrases and stuff like that, which I thought was very interesting. And I thought he actually delivered a surprisingly sympathetic performance for a character who's basically a psychopath.
And serial killer.
A serial killer, how many people do you have to kill to be officially a serial killer? Because he only really killed 6 people or something like that.
That's a serial killer. Don't forget, Andrew Cunanan only killed about 5.
Okay. But I just, whatever. But I thought they really did establish how he developed this remorselessness and this contempt for just humanity in general. Because it wasn't just the Christianity thing. It was also the fact that his father had no choice. He couldn't fight back because, they would have all been killed.
Yeah, they killed him.
Well, yeah.
And his son didn't see that.
The Imperial military.
Then there's all sorts of stuff. Where
Did you like the subplot, by the way, with the father and his wife?
Yeah, and there's a lot of things which you saw where they were sort of justifying his behavior, his attitude towards everything, because everyone was pretty much a hypocrite around him about everything. And I thought they presented that very clearly. But I love the dark humor moments. I love that whole scene where he kills the attorney, and the attorney is in the the cabinet won't shut. And these little moments. And then there's that whole moment where he's just going apeshit. You don't know why, and you find out that he can't find a can opener. And he already killed a guy without finding that out. And there's these little moments in there which I thought
that's why I like it.
But they were
I
good.
love that, those little moments, because that's what I think make the movie, is that he's just this insane lunatic. There's a scene in the movie, I'll never forget, he kills this person, and he's trying to hide the blood, so he pisses on his hands to get rid of the blood. I mean, this is a really disgusting human being, and I think they did a really good job of portraying this. Now, Mike, what do you say? You haven't said too much about this at all. Did you see the movie?
I wanted to give everybody a shot. I kind of out of everybody agree with Jeff on this, and it was a hard slog to get through. I mean, I wasn't cursing you, but I was like, holy hell, oh my God, this is long. Oh, wow, shit.
Well, we're almost done.
Some quick stuff. The lead actor is fantastic.
Ken Ogata.
The lead actress, very sexy, great nude scene. Really fucked up family. Everybody in here is really
until next
up.
week.
And a brutal scene where the guy he should kill is the one that is raping his girlfriend, and he doesn't kill the guy.
Until
That's
next week,
up.
people. Because we'll continue this conversation. The movie is Vengeance is Mine. See it, please. Thank you.
Vengeance is mine, right?
Oh, yeah, at least we got them all in.